Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, How to Write a Philosophy Paper. In this video, we're going to be looking at summarizing an argument. So, one of the most important skills in philosophy writing is the ability to summarize someone else's argument. Unfortunately, the best philosophers are often bad at clearly and succinctly expressing their ideas. It's your job in a philosophy paper to take the long, rambling treatise and turn it into two tight paragraphs which pack the same punch and clearly express the ideas while being very succinct and clear. The degree of challenge present here will depend on the clarity of the original arguments. If they offer clear premises and a conclusion and support for each premise, your job may be easy. If they offer eloquent but opaque descriptions or use antiquated terminology, this can be much, much more difficult. If a philosopher offers clear premises and a conclusion, use them. This is the heart of the argument. If they don't exactly list their premises, but seem to allude to statements which, when taken together, would imply a particular conclusion, you can summarize these as an approximation of an argument. If it's possible to summarize an argument in premise-conclusion form, you should do it. It makes it much easier to analyze and to point to which premises or deductions may be shaky. Even if you have to kind of craft this argument out of assumptions you might make based on what someone's talking about, this may be a very easy way to start formulating and understanding that. And presenting it in your paper, just make sure that what you're doing is actually supported by the text and actually supported by what the author's saying. One important thing to keep in mind when summarizing an argument is the philosophical principle of charity. Basically, you should interpret an argument as the most powerful it could possibly be. If you're summarizing an argument and you see a clear flaw in the argument as originally stated, which could be easily resolved by restating the argument in a different way, you don't get any points in philosophy for nitpicking at a straw man or an argument that's artificially weak. Instead, you should present the original argument and then add something like a more charitable interpretation might be, or just present the charitable version to begin with, because that's probably what the initial philosopher meant. Once you have a sense of the premises and the conclusion for the argument you're trying to outline, your goal is to simplify it as much as possible. It's a challenge to condense a full article into a paragraph or two, but there are a few things you can do to make it easier. First, focus on the author's particular contribution to the discussion. If you feel the most interesting thing about the paper is an argument from another author, maybe that paper is what you should be writing on, or that should be the source that you're focusing on. If not, focus on the particular contribution that that author makes to the literature, whatever their argument or their position is that's new. Then, once you've identified that specific argument that you're going to focus down on the support that the author provides for each premise of the argument, and then the logic used to show that those premises imply the conclusion. If there are some premises that are generally accepted, that few have objected to, or that you won't really be focusing on, feel free to gloss over support for them. But if there are premises or logical moves that are central to your eventual objections, or to the objections of another philosopher that you're going to be putting this philosopher in conversation with, take your time in outlining the support that an author provides for them. The key is to provide the best possible case for the argument, so that your objection or the objections of another philosopher can have no possible responses. Basically, you need to put the best face on this argument so that when and if you take it down, no one can claim that you just took down a straw man and you didn't actually tackle the real argument. Quotes can be particularly useful when an author provides an argument in premise-conclusion form or defines what they mean by a certain term. As with any paper, it's a good idea to restate the quote in your own words afterward. However, in philosophy, you want to spend more time picking apart details of the essential elements of an argument instead of just using as many quotes as you can to make your point for you. Your commentary should illuminate how this argument connects to your bigger claims in the paper, or how this argument can be put into conversation with another argument. And you can, especially when an author's statements are very opaque and difficult to interpret, quotes are very useful in saying, this is my interpretation, and this is exactly the specific line that I'm pulling that interpretation from. Now, many arguments are supported by thought experiments. Sometimes these are quintessential to the argument and provide necessary support for the only controversial premise. In these situations, it makes sense to spend some time outlining the details of the thought experiment as opposed to focusing on the argument itself. If, for example, the author is presenting an argument that has two non-controversial premises and one premise that's controversial but is strongly supported by their thought experiment, the argument itself isn't the central thing that you necessarily need to focus on. You need to focus on what the support for that premise is, which takes the form of that thought experiment. And so taking your time to outline in your own words what that thought experiment really looks like may be pretty important, especially if that's where your objections or the objections of other philosophers are going to be pointed at. If other writers who have objected to the argument focus on the particulars of that thought experiment, it's especially important for you to accurately outline it. But especially if it's long, be careful of quoting it directly. If you think it's important to get the author's exact words, that's one thing. But if you think you can summarize it in your own words, that's definitely can be a positive. So there are many ways to summarize an argument. And the best place to see examples of different techniques is in philosophy papers and encyclopedia articles. Good secondary sources are great at pulling the essential parts of an argument out while leaving all the fluff. These can be a great way to check your work and see if you missed something important from the main article or included something that other authors think is superfluous. So while I wouldn't just copy down from a secondary source or solely take from them, they can be useful as kind of a checking device to say, oh, wow, I completely missed the point there, or I completely missed that argument, or, wow, my argument's spot on in terms of this summary. Next up, we're going to look at objecting to an argument as we finish out the first half of this series and the first half of the month of October. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.